take me back to the trenches, because at least then my mentality was, I can handle this because it's temporary, and I know how to handle that version of hard. I know how to handle the past version of hard because I am wiser in this moment. Hello, good morning, and welcome to this episode of the Uncovered podcast. My name is Maddie, and I am in the 4-month sleep regression trenches, and I am like barely a human today. So all of the wonderful, slightly overconfident, our baby sleeps really well, gives us 8-hour stretches, has dissolved. Although a couple days ago, he did a 9-hour stretch and then 8-hour stretch. And then it was 3 hours, 30 minutes. And now he just will not go to sleep in his crib overnight, at all, after the first stretch. So we're going through it. And therefore, this is going to be a short little bite episode, because frankly, I just don't have the brain power for anything more significant. And we might be on borrowed time because he is here in the carrier again with me, which is very sweet. But it did take approximately 20 to 30 minutes of bouncing continuously on the exercise ball in order to get him to drift off and snooze. So this is where we are today. And the topic, actually, I had thought of before, but this day actually exemplifies it very, very well. I'm just going to talk about the trenches of both motherhood and newborn and baby kind of trenches, and the recovery trenches, and why, when you're further along in the journey, you kind of might crave those early days of things. So the easy one to bring to mind first is the motherhood newborn trenches, because those were relatively recent. But because we're in this kind of strange regression era, I find myself wishing that we were back in the time where he was brand new and those were the newborn trenches, because in hindsight it felt much more doable than this feels now. And I think that there might be a few reasons for this, but at the time the biggest factor is that it has to do with expectations. So when you are in the newborn trenches, when you have a brand new little human being, your assumption is this is going to be difficult. This baby's going to wake up a lot. This baby's going to have a lot of needs. The baby might need to be on me a lot. It might be that we're awake every hour, every couple hours, every 30 minutes. Those things are part of sort of the package of newborn life that you get a little bit prepared for from people, because they're like, yes, newborn trenches, are you getting any sleep? So you're mentally going in to the early days of motherhood and parenthood with that in your mind. And then whether or not your experience matches that, so your expectations are, this is going to be very, very difficult. And so if it's better than that, happy days. And if it is that, because the bar is just so low, it can't possibly be worse than you think it's going to be those first couple of weeks, because you've set yourself up to be I can do this, we can do this, this will be hard. So you're not going to be let down. Even if it's a little bit harder than you think, you expect it to be difficult. But then you get sort of along the journey a little further, and maybe stuff improves. Maybe it doesn't. Not everybody has a baby that then, does better stretches. And I know that there are some people that are I haven't had more than 2-hour chunks of sleep at a time in 8 months. And honestly, do not know how you're alive. But when you get further along and there's some semblance of either longer stretches or some predictability or normalcy as to the pattern, because the pattern does kind of emerge, or at least for us it did, in those kind of couple of months after, where he was really a lot easier to predict, and we kind of had an idea of what we could expect kind of day over day, night over night. And I've talked in the last episode about, at the beginning you have nothing but time but very little sleep, and then later you have more sleep but like not a lot of time, and then in the middle where we are, it's like you've neither. But in the beginning you're expecting that, so expectations and reality marry up relatively well. Then as you get further along, once this kind of like change happens where you've been having some good patterning and then something changes, like a regression or a progression or a developmental leap or whatever it is that you want to call it, you are shocked. Your system is more shocked by it because your expectations are now, I have this baby that like has somewhat of a predictable pattern or preferences or certain things work, and then wham, this doesn't work anymore. This baby, it doesn't sleep anymore. Like everything is really difficult, and it rocks you in a way that makes the beginning feel compelling. And it's like, take me back to the trenches, because at least then my mentality was, I can handle this because it's temporary, and I know how to handle that version of hard. I know how to handle the past version of hard because I am wiser in this moment. And so you're like, take me back. This is like, I can handle that version, but all of this newness, all of this new version of difficulty, now I'm feeling like way out of my depth. I think also sort of like the adrenaline, the novelty, all of that has kind of shifted by the time you're in sort of like 3-4 months, where all of a sudden you're like rocked back into lack of sleep, and it's like it's not fun and exciting anymore. Not that it, lack of sleep is ever fun and exciting, but like the baby is brand new and you're like, oh my gosh, we're figuring this out. We're a partnership. Like we can do this. And then at this point you're like, we're just so confused and tired about how to address this. I find myself being like, oh, take me back to the quote unquote newborn trenches, because also everybody expected you to be going through a tricky time during that period, and parents and moms and maybe the general people, they know about this like 4-month sleep regression, fine. But the support and the check-ins and the wow, still going through it, people and messaging doesn't dry up, but it definitely comes down, because they're like, well, you've been at this for 4 months, like I'm sure you've kind of figured out this baby by now, and they like, in some ways you have, but in some ways you definitely have not, and you're meeting a new baby every day. Like you're going to meet thousands of versions of your baby and your child over time, because they're just rapidly going through change. And so you're almost catching up in every single moment with not just where they are developmentally, but how they behave and what their patterns are and what works and what doesn't work. So you're meeting this new baby every day. And it's very, very exciting as well, because you're like, oh my gosh, you made a different sound with your mouth today. Like that is insanely joy-provoking. I love this. I like cannot stop thinking about this, but it is like this over and over and over playing catch up and change. So you're playing catch up at every moment, like with this new version of this baby, and in a time of more taxing sort of situations or stress or whatever it is, it's almost like you want to harken back to a time where you felt like you were more in control, or you feel like if you were in that situation, you'd be able to exert more control over it because it feels more familiar to you than where you are currently. And that is how recovery feels when you're not through it, but you're not right at the beginning of it. So I've talked about the mucky middle many, many times, but at the beginning of recovery, you have a few things in your favor. One is novelty, commitment, the fact that you've reached potentially rock bottom and anything might be better than what you're currently going through. So you're like willing to do the work. You're like willing to make change. You're excited about things. And if you're in a situation where you're like really actually doing the work and eating the food and stopping the exercise, and your body is kind of catching up with this sort of nourishment and feeling different, it gives you kind of a high. You get like a really early recovery high. And the structure that well-done recovery gives you between meal plans and day planning and appointments and accountability and check-ins and resources, that early stage has a lot of power behind it. It has a lot of energy behind it, and you're putting energy into it, and it's new to you, and you feel motivated because you just want to recover, and you have all this support to help you feel motivated. And then you kind of get along a little bit further, and it's not that the support dries up, but it becomes more routine. It becomes more Groundhog Day week over week. And you're moving through, especially physical sensations in a lot of cases, that are extremely uncomfortable. And at the beginning, those uncomfortable sensations, you can kind of get through because you have a lot of support, and you may even be able to wrap your brain around the fact that, like, I'm really, really unwell and these changes have to happen. But when you get to a certain stage of recovery, you don't want any more changes to happen because you're like, this is enough change for me. My body has changed enough and I am eating enough, and I do not want to eat the same amount that I have been eating because I feel like I will explode in weight, or my body will change, or my bloating will never go away. Whatever this is, it becomes this like very unfamiliar version of hard. Whereas early recovery, especially if people have kind of been through relapse or have kind of had some false starts with recovery and done it again, you get hyper familiar with that early cycle of recovery. And that's where the revolving door can really, really come into play as a risk, because you get really motivated and then stop and then hit rock bottom again. And they get really motivated to do it again, then hit rock bottom. And if you cannot gather the momentum to launch yourself out of that cycle, you will stay there forever. You have to decide, I will take this all the way through the really uncomfortable, mucky middle part. But during that period of time, and then even sometimes in later recovery or when you're recovered, there are these elements of early recovery that feel compelling. One is obviously that if you're in the mucky middle and you haven't adjusted to this new body that is the body that your body wants to be, or you haven't allowed your body to stay where it wants to be for long enough that it reconstitutes itself in a way that actually you can cope with, because that will happen. Part of the compelling part about early recovery then becomes, I miss that smaller body that needed so much extra food because I was so direly underweight or so differently nourished that I needed to have this pattern and this structure of food, and it felt abundant and it felt controlled and it felt like really patterned. I need to have that control back. I need to have that body back. So early recovery feels very compelling. So when stuff starts to feel harder, like really hard, and you're meeting these new versions of yourself, so rather than when you're in the newborn trenches and baby trenches, and when you're watching your baby grow, you're meeting a new version of this baby every day. When you're in recovery, you're meeting a new version of yourself every day. And you may not like certain parts of that person, or you may be afraid of what that person might look like, sound like, act like, or feel like. You might be afraid that the version of me that is restored or well or recovered cannot tolerate the amount of feelings I'm going to have about this new body and about this new life. And so staying numb in that early phase of recovery, before your brain is even like back online and your hormones are even back online, that then becomes, again, compelling. You're like, it wasn't great, but at least I wasn't feeling the not greatness. At least I wasn't feeling that level of discomfort. So that's when that becomes compelling as well. Now, as you move even further along, and you might be quote unquote fully recovered, you might be really in a strong place, and something might rock you. Something might come into your life that is not food or body related, but that is a stressor of some kind. And then that can also create a situation where not only is the eating disorder compelling, but if you're strong enough to have shut that voice down really truly and really done your recovery work, it won't be so much like, I wish that I was in my eating disorder again. I wish I had my eating disorder again. There's something about the structure of early recovery and something about knowing how that part of it goes, the predictability about what early recovery looks like, that feels like something you want to attach to. And that could look like, wow, that meal plan from the hospital, or that meal plan from my early recovery, or the foods that I was used to eating then, or the amounts that I was used to eating then feel compelling because I'm in a stressed situation, and that feels like something that I can latch onto. Like, take me back to the recovery trenches where life was difficult, but simpler. It feels like it was simpler back then, because in proper recovery, your whole life is actually then just focused on that one thing. And that means that you don't have to think about other things. So whether you've taken time off work or not, but whether you've restructured the way that you work or the schedule or the things that are in your life, or making plans versus not making so many plans, or just being at home a lot, or being in the hospital and just having no reason or ability to be making your own choices for a period of time, that actually feels like a holiday when you're in a period of your life that feels stressful. You're like, oh, someone else just make decisions for me. Just give me a meal plan, sit me down, let me just do a coloring book and a group therapy chat. And that, I knew how that would feel and how that would go. But this newness, whatever this new stressor is in my new version of me in my life, now I have to navigate that newness, and I don't want to. So it becomes this like, take me back to the trenches of early recovery. So in this period where I feel a little bit of stress or a little bit of unpredictability with our sleep and our life and our baby, I've had these kind of feelings of, oh, like those dishes, like those foods and those meals that I used to like make for myself in recovery, they all of a sudden have like popped into my mind. And it has been such a strange experience for me because they were great meals. They were wholesome meals. They were like meals that are totally appropriate to eat now. But they had this association with recovery and early recovery where it was what I felt good eating at the time. And so it's like, now that I have some stress, it's giving me this, my brain's giving me this signal of like, just, do something that's easy, that, that's patterned, that is well trodden in terms of food and things like that. So to me, it's so strange to just have this impulse to eat like a meal plan that was for my early recovery when I'm so far beyond it. And so it was just something I didn't notice. That I was like, the recovery trenches for me were just like so simple, not easy, but simple, where it's just life was a recovery center. Apartment was a recovery center. I was working, but from home. I was podcasting and I was eating and like not exercising. And like those things, while difficult, do not require you to juggle a ton of stuff. And some people argue, yes, I was still juggling many things at that time, but there was something that the primary goal took away the distraction of other types of decision making that I would have to do. So yeah, I was just noticing these parallels, and I'm continue to notice parallels between going through the early stages of motherhood and parenthood and these stages of recovery and different things that kind of happen physically, mentally, emotionally. So yeah, that's kind of all that I really wanted to talk about today. But I will say this just on a note, because I mentioned it in the episode, is that if you stick with recovery long enough, your body will figure itself out. Like you have to commit for that to really happen, and you have to stay at your kind of like recovered weight or body or whatever, and eat and continue to make your body trust you again by doing that. But your body will sort itself out. It really will. It doesn't feel like it. It feels like you will be in this weird, misshapen, terrible feeling body forever. But it doesn't. The problem is that like you actually have to do it all in. You can't kind of like halfway skirt around and like hope for the best. Like your body will just not respond to that kind of mistrust that you've created for it. But it will happen. Like it will normalize and settle itself out and reconstitute, whatever that means. Do you know what I mean? Like everybody, like it might not be the body that you thought you wanted. It almost certainly won't be. But actually it will be a body that you will be able to make peace with. That's how I say it, because your brain will have caught up by then. The body usually goes first and then the brain comes along. I'm sure that's actually probably true of motherhood too, where maybe your body like takes a while to resettle itself out and feel like a normal body again. It may never be the same, and in recovery it may not be the same as it was in your eating disorder. Very likely it won't be, but you can cope with that newness if you sit with it and you live in it for long enough. And then your brain catches up, and then you get to be happy again. And you will be. If you're unhappy in chunks or overall, there is light on the other side for sure. So hopefully when I listen to this back, this will make sense and be loud enough, because I'm trying to keep this little Bubba napping. But yeah, we're in it, but we're getting through it. And it's like, how long could a 4-month sleep regression last? Can't be more than a month. Then we'd be into 5 months. I'm sure there's another regression coming then, or a developmental leap. It's like a rebrand of regression is like, oh no, it's a developmental leap. It's a progression. I'm like, I do believe that, and I know that. But the sleep, yeah, I would go back and tell past Maddie to have some better kind of like sleep habits entrained into baby from an earlier time, because now we have this reliance on certain habits and practices in order to get baby to go to sleep. Anyway, that's a topic for another episode. And the next episode will be about relationships postpartum because I have more content about that. Okay, have a really good day. And if you don't have a baby and you have the chance to go to sleep early tonight and sleep for as long as possible, for me, will you please do that? If you don't have a baby and you have the chance to have a nice sleep tonight, I just hope you take your little melatonin or your little cherry juice or magnesium or nothing at all. Just lull yourself into sleep. Don't set an alarm. Sleep as long as humanly possible. That is my advice to anybody that is able to do that and make that choice today. Okay, bye-bye. See you on the next episode.